Well, good morning, everyone. As Liz said, my name is Timothy Downs. I'm Regional Director for North Carolina Economic Development for Thomas and Hutton, civil engineering firm located in the Southeast United States. And I proudly serve on the NCEDA Board of Directors. I'm happy to be your MC for today's webinar, The Power of Mobile Analytics, and we're excited to have you with us. Before starting the program, I'd like to acknowledge NCDA's annual sponsors, whose logos you'll see on the screen. These companies and organizations support every component of NCDA's expansive mission and our growing body of programs. We thank all these sponsors for their generous support, and webinars that benefit our membership like this one result from that support. During today's webinar, we'll dive into how mobile location data can be a powerful tool for economic development. Placer is a location analytics platform that leverages mobile location data to provide market intelligence for any place in the United States. Today, we'll explore how communities and economic development organizations can use this data. This kind of data has become essential for telling the story of a community, highlighting how people and businesses interact with different places and understanding the unique markets they shape. Now I'll introduce our speaker, Caitlin Green. Caitlin is a senior account executive on the Placer Civic team, where she leverages her passion for driving social change through local leadership and data-driven decision-making. With over 2.5 years at Placer, Caitlin is dedicated to advancing the power of data to transform communities. Her background combines valuable experience from a smart city startup and from her work with the city of Green Bay, where she contributed to parks and recreation and community development initiatives. Caitlin's diverse expertise enables her to approach challenges with innovative solutions that foster progress and economic growth. Caitlin will have time at the end for questions, but if you have questions during the presentation, please feel free to use the raise hand button and Caitlin will take your question. If needed, your audio is not working or whatever, feel free to enter a question in the chat feature during the presentation and we'll get to those questions as needed. So Caitlin, thank you for being with us. The floor is yours.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much. Caitlin Green from Placer. It's a pleasure to meet you. Let me share my screen with you guys and we can get started. All righty. So you guys already know, before I dive into that, just in terms of how we spend our time together today, I do want to spend like 3 or 4 minutes just going through a few quick slides on Placer, who we are, what we do, most importantly, how we're doing it. And then we'll pivot and dive over to the platform. And ultimately, like what I'll demonstrate to you guys is the most powerful market insights platform in the world. But we'll explore how towns, cities, counties, EDAs, IDAs, universities, all of the above are leveraging our data. And then I have a couple things prepared that I want to highlight for you guys today, but I can always pivot on the fly too. So I really encourage you guys to ask questions and we can kind of make this as interactive and as engaging as you guys would like. So Placer is a location analytics platform. So we're leveraging mobile location data to provide market intelligence for any physical place in the country. So we can tell you things like how many people visit any place at any given time, but also things generally speaking like where they live, where else they like to go, even the roads that they're taking to get there. On 5 years now, we have become like the leading data provider for over 4,500 customers across the United States, actually, but over 1,500 of those are civic entities. So everything from towns of, I kid you not, 125 people up to like state level organizations as well. We are working with over 50 civic entities across the state of North Carolina. A few of those, the North Carolina Department of Commerce, working with Rockingham County, Eden, downtown Greensboro, Concord, Hickory, the Downtown Raleigh Alliance, and Electricities, just to name a few. Now, how Placer works is extremely unique in the sense that we're not purchasing any data at all, but what we're doing is we're actually sourcing our own. And we are doing that by partnering with dozens of mobile apps on your phone that require that second system level opt-in for location services. And then through that, we've created a panel of about 30 million mobile devices that we're observing the behavior of and then aggregating anonymously with some of the top third-party data sets in the country. Nice. So another important thing for you guys to note, since you are all serving the greater public, and even those like consultants that might be in the room today are serving the greater public too, is that we're not collecting any personal identifiable information. So we don't know who these devices belong to. You couldn't send somebody a thank you card for going to your favorite local restaurant. We are only observing the latitude and longitude of the mobile device and then aggregating for and extrapolating for movement patterns over time. Ultimately, too, a few other things of note before we get into some of the good stuff. A few things that set us apart. First is unmatched accuracy. So Placer's data, and all data like this, is consistently validated and back tested against first-party or ground truth data sources. So our correlations consistently exceed 90% levels of accuracy, but often as high as 93 to 98%. Following that, too, our data does span the entire country, goes back to 2017. And then, like I mentioned earlier, we are partnering with some of the top third-party data sets in the country, making them available on the platform for our customers. So all of that being said, anything we go through in the next like 45 minutes together today, you guys can ultimately consider to be just like a high-level overview in terms of what mobile location data is and how it can support different economic development initiatives and communities. But purely for your context, what you're looking at are really the 9 most common ways that universities, counties, cities, EDAs are leveraging our data to accomplish their goals and make decisions more effectively. Given who we have in the room today, I want to talk a lot about like market analysis and retail recruitment, as well as things like business attraction, workforce analysis, and then I'll probably sprinkle in a couple of these other ones at leisure too, but those are the two that I'm going to try to highlight. So that being said, let's boogie on over. Okay. I guess before I get into this, are any of you guys on the call right now using any sort of mobile location data? Like how familiar are we as a group with this concept? Is this pretty introductory today, or are we sitting with a lot of users and experts?
Feel free to unmute yourselves and share, with
Might
Caitlin.
change how I talk to you if you guys are all already using data.
We aren't currently using it here in Fayetteville and Cumberland, but I've gone through a Placer AI demo and definitely found out how useful it can be.
Okay,
So I'm familiar with the concept.
sweet.
Hey, Caitlin, James Carter, City of Charlotte. I am on the opposite end of that totem pole. I've certainly heard about your wonderful platform, but this is a first introduction.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, if you guys have any questions, want me to slow down or speed up, let me know. So hopping over to our dashboard, this right here is our home screen. So how it works is in this explore bar on the left side, this is just where you guys will type in any city name, any address. And what you are going to see on the screen is just everything that's already indexed into Placer's dashboard in the given area that you're looking at. So a few things of note for you. First is that subscriptions to Placer, and this is a little bit unique to us, actually come with unlimited points of interest across the entire state, which is cool because then you can look at in like competitive scenarios, communities that aren't your own as well. But in order to put anything in here that you don't already see listed on the side, there's a few different options. One of them being you can just hit the support request button and then upload a list of addresses or points of interest you'd like to see in the system. And those will be back, depending on the size of the list, in 2 to 5 business days. Or if you don't have that long too, you can create your own custom geofence right on the fly to gain insights immediately. One other thing of note, kind of since we're not going to cover everything today, or probably not, is that a point of interest can actually be as small as what we call a traffic pin. So just on any section of public road, in front of any vacancy or site for development, redevelopment, to allow you guys to understand the behavior of the people traveling by every day. So not only where they're coming from and where they're going to, but like how far they are traveling from their work location and what their brand affinity is for a grocery store. Can also be as small as a local ice cream store and as large as an entire industrial park, business corridor, neighborhood, subdivision, city, county, state park, custom 500 square mile area. So you can get those very business specific insights, but equally that ability to zoom out and get those macro level insights around movement and behavior patterns as well. So here, wait, I'm the worst multitasker you'd ever meet. I just introducing, hovering over my neighborhood, Blair Kennedy. Blair Kennedy, who are you representing today?
Sorry about that. I couldn't get unmuted. I'm with the NCEDA. It was just funny.
Okay.
You're like, never mind.
Oh, okay, nice. I was like,
Sorry about that.
what a coincidence. Okay, so I want to start with North Hills today because it looks like a pretty cool mixed use destination space that also has a lot of workforce potential and interest as well. So that's what I want to start with, but we can end up pivoting to. A few things I want to highlight here. So this top bar here, you guys can compare and contrast up to 8 different locations at the same time. Then you can also look at the same location side by side for different periods of time. Following that, our data goes back to January 1st of 2017. And then there's only a 4-day lag on it, and it's updated every day. So it's really easy to go back and understand those changes and patterns over time, get that pre-COVID data, but also when you log on a Monday, you can get real-time insights from the past Friday. A few other key filters. This is going to be more in regards to the workforce and business attraction conversation. So you guys can filter by the visitors to any place, which is purely just who is going there. But if you are looking at a larger geographic area like this, or like an industrial park or a whole city, county, you can also filter for things like employees and residents to understand their movement patterns and behavior. So how far are employees traveling for work compared to how far they used to? I mean, one of the trends we've seen across the country at Placer, just more on our research team, is that since people aren't going to the office every day, people are willing to travel further for more distance for work than they used to. So this filter can help quantify that for you guys. The resident filter, that can be as simple as like, if you're looking at a specific neighborhood, what are the brand affinities for grocery stores of those residents? How far are they traveling for like a food access and equity conversation? Now, a question I usually get there is, well, how do you guys know if it's an employee or a resident? That's purely just based off the behavior of the mobile device. So if the same mobile device is going to the same residential location, 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, 30 days, we've determined that as its home location, and that's how we can tell you that it's a resident of that city or zip code, and vice versa too for employees in commercial spaces. You guys can also filter for any specific day in regards to events, different seasons, even days of the week, hours of the day. You can specify different lengths of stay. And if you're only trying to understand maybe the behavior and patterns of maybe people coming from at least 50 miles away, you could do that too. So what we're going to look at today, on the left, the purple color, purple blue, that is just all visitors into this North Hills area. And then in the red, what you guys are going to be looking at is all those people that are employed in that area. So this metric section, this is the bread and butter of Placer's platform and where we get the phrase foot traffic data. This panel visits number is the number of Placer monitor devices that have gone into that area on either an employee or visitor pattern over the course of the last year. So that is our ground truth. We are taking that number and we're looking at, okay, how frequently are people going? Honestly, the visitors are going pretty frequently, 16 times per year. And then we are extrapolating for the rest of the US population with our own proprietary algorithms to find that 2.2 million unique individuals going 16 times per year have made up 8.6 million visits to this area, which is up 1% year over year and 2.3% year over 2 year. And specific to the employees in this greater area, you are looking at about 100,000 unique individuals going about 67 times per year, making up 775,000 visits, employee visits to that area, which is also up year over year and year over 2 year. So I do typically like to pause here, even though we're in a bigger group today. Are there any questions so far on how we're doing this? Or is there anything I can help clarify before we get into some more of the nitty-gritty stuff?
I have spotlighted Caitlin just so that it's easier for everybody to kind of focus on the presentation, but I can still see if, folks have raised their hand. So still feel free to do that during the presentation, and we'll note that and make sure that Caitlin gets to answer your question.
Well, moving along. So this visits trend section right here, clearly you're looking at a line graph, so showing your visits on a daily, weekly, or monthly frequency. So this is a really good spot to understand changes in patterns over time. If there was an event, or even, I mean, I was looking at a mine the other day and they had a fire, unfortunately. So all their employees have not been to work in a little while. So this is a really good spot to see where those trends are happening. So the busiest days kind of just to this North Hills area in general, it makes sense because it looks like there's a lot of shopping, where the Saturdays leading up to Christmas, and quietest on Christmas Day. And in terms of employee behavior patterns, quietest the week over Christmas as well. And honestly, busiest on Wednesdays and Thursdays, which is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We'll look at that in a second too. But I always find it interesting to look at areas back to 2017 to understand, okay, well, how has it recovered since COVID? Because it's really easy in our platform. Not to say you shouldn't celebrate like that 1% growth year over year, the 2% year over 2 year, but how does that look since pre-COVID? Have you recovered? So let's look at this on the total visits. So we're looking at the visitors still. On the far left, this is monthly back to January of 2017. So you can see the total monthly visits to this space peaked in Decembers of 2018 and 2019 with around 900,000 visits. The world stopped. And Decembers have still been the busiest time there since COVID. But this area has not hit pre-COVID visitation. It's fallen short in December by about 50,000 total visits. And then popping over and taking a look at employee trends too. So once again, looking at this monthly back to 2017. Total employee visits per month peaked pretty early here, May of 2017. And what have we've recovered to 73,000. So the employee visits has actually recovered in terms of its peak number. And this baseline change sometimes is an easier way to look at it as well. I'm gonna skip over a few things right now. Actually, a question for you guys. How many of you, it'll change what I highlight today. Do any of you guys have any interest in retail, like in retail performance and visitation, or are the folks in the room here, are you guys more interested in business and workforce? I can do 50-50 split. I can just talk.
I'm definitely more intrigued on the business and workforce side, but I don't want to speak for the entire group.
Okay.
I'll say that we're probably equally interested in the two. So I like the split 50-50 approach.
Okay. Sounds good. I'll speak now. So a couple things I want to highlight then. Under this market landscape tab right here, I'm going to turn off this heat map because there's a different spot I typically like to look at this. But what here you guys can do is really easily visualize the most visited locations in any given area. So let's type in grocery. So here you guys could see, okay, what are we pulling for our top visited grocery stores in the area? Now, one of the cool things about Placer, there's two different ways I've seen communities use this. One of them is the city of Lancaster, Texas, is a majority minority community. And what they actually used this function of the platform for was they knew other communities across the United States that demographically and by size were very similar to theirs. So what they did was they went and looked at those other communities, looked at their top performing fast food restaurants on grocery stores to kind of make their list in terms of what could make sense to bring into Lancaster, Texas. On the flip side of that too, we're working with the Annapolis Downtown Partnership. And one of the things they're working on was updating their transportation plan. So it just so happens that the director of the Downtown Annapolis Partnership was on the board for the Transportation Committee. But what he noticed was the most visited grocery store in their entire city didn't have a bus stop on it anymore, that they had changed that a few years ago. I don't remember if it was from construction or something else. But once they realized that, that prompted them to go talk to the route drivers, and they were like, yeah, ever since we changed the route, visitation on this line has completely dropped. So while I think it's cool that you can use this not only for like transportation and equity, but also for that retail recruitment and market analysis component as well. So Placer can also show you things like the daily visits to any place. And you can look at this in terms of the total numbers or percentage. So this area is pretty consistent in terms of employee behavior to what we see for a lot of office spaces and business parks across the United States, is that employees are most likely to go into the office on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, less or so Mondays and Fridays. Chin along. Pull up a different screen while this loads. Okay, so under this trade area tab, what you guys are looking at here is where all visitation has come from for any of the filters you've applied. So this is where everybody has come from in the last year that's visited that North Hills area. And I got this loaded on the other screen too. Now, on the flip side of this is also where you guys can start doing some workforce analysis. So this is where everybody is traveling from that is working in that North Hills development. Now, if you're anything like me, this is great, but I'm also not very proficient in ArcGIS. So we can also give you all of this same data down to the specific zip code level too, to help you guys quantify like resident versus non-resident behavior, or if you guys are working on specific marketing campaigns, let it be for employees or visitors, to really help quantify and understand the success of those. Now there's an IDA that we're working with outside of Atlanta, and I'm blanking on the name of it right now. But what they actually got Placer for was to look at the different manufacturing facilities in the greater area, filter for the employees of those facilities. And then they actually went into this year-over-year change. So what you guys are looking at right now, the green here is showing where there has been a growth in employee visits, but you could also see that just on the unique individual level as well. So the green is showing a growth in employees for the North Hills area from that given zip code. The gray is about net neutral and the orange is a decline. So what this IDA was using Placer for is they were trying to understand just in general, where was more of the employee growth happening? Was it people coming from inside the city of Atlanta out to go work in these facilities, or is it people coming from the more rural counties coming closer to the city? And they used that to really help start the foundation of what their employee business attraction and employee workforce attraction campaign was going to look like. I'm not super familiar with the Raleigh area. Not sure if anybody in the room here is, but it's pretty consistent that where the increase in visitation or increase employees here have been from the north part of the city. I mean, that makes sense. That's where this is located. But sometimes the things you see will surprise you. On the flip side of this too, from more of the retail conversation, we're working with a community in northern New Mexico called Raton. It's a community of about 8,000 people. And they really didn't have much for fast food or apparel shopping options. So what they were using Placer for was actually to look at retailers and fast food in Trinidad, Colorado, really the closest community to them. And they were looking at those retailers and understanding down to the zip code level, how many of their residents were going to shop and eat there to quantify that leakage and make the case to bring those retailers to town. Then we can also show you this on like a trade area distribution scale too. So remember, the purple is still the visitors and the red is the employees. In terms of percent of total visits, this area is very highly used pretty locally. Was not hired here for fast math, but 40% just about of all the visits to this area are people coming just from only 1 to 5 miles away. So it's marketed as a destination and it is performing to be a pretty local destination. Not sure if that was the intention of it or not, but that's what's performing well at this point. And in terms of employees, 26% of all the employee visits are actually coming from 10 to 30 miles away. So people are willing to travel further there to work than they are to shop and hang out. Okay, I'm going to go through one more section, then I'm going to make you guys talk to me for a minute. So under this audience profile section, what we are doing is we are overlaying demographic data, workforce data, market outlook data over the trade area that we're looking at. So when I am saying trade area, what I'm referring to is really where the top 70% of visits are actually coming from that are going to any place. However, if you guys wanted to look at all 100%, you can do that too. And then in the spirit of a comparison today, I want to compare the visitor trade area to the workforce trade area. So just kind of as we saw in that trade area coverage by distance scale, people are generally willing to travel further here to work here than they are to visit. And you can see that reflected here right now pretty clearly. So like it's drawing an employee trade area from Durham, from Holly Springs, Willow Springs, White Oak. Now, Pop Stats, we have dozens of different data sets in Placer's platform. I always like to show Pop Stats. Pop Stats, it gives you guys insights not only into demographics, but it's also things like population projections and disposable and discretionary income. Just for your context, I'm going to change this. The center line right here is the state average, and I want you guys to think of it as 100. And then the purple and red are how your visitor and employee trade areas is comparing to that. So one thing right off the bat that I want to highlight is if you are looking at the visitor trade area for this space, it's pulling from a trade area of about 600,000 people. What we've seen like this really powerful for, honestly, is typically when looking at smaller towns and more rural counties that have had a really hard time painting and telling the true story of how far people are actually traveling to work there and to shop there. Maybe it's a community of about 15,000 people, but they know people are traveling 45 minutes, but they don't have any way to show or communicate that. That is how a lot of communities are using this part of the platform. So a couple things that stand out to me. The visitor household median income is about 27% higher than the state average, with a median income of about $90,000. That is a little bit lower for the employees, about 84,000. Pretty consistent down here, 52,000 average income per person, which is just a little bit higher than the employee trade area. And both of these trade areas are significantly higher than the state average for people with a bachelor's degree. Okay, so there's a different data set we have in our platform called STI Workplace that goes into salaries and different NAC codes a lot more detailed. But I think PopStats does a really nice overview depending on what you're trying to accomplish and understand. So both of these trade areas are indexing really high for professional services and information. However, kind of that information IT category is only counting for about 2.5% of this total trade area. Now, how EDAs and EDCs are using this function of the platform. For example, some are really leveraging those traffic pins that I mentioned earlier in the call. For example, we're working with a community in Alabama called Tupelo, and they were working on bringing a new Toyota manufacturer to their community. So what they did was they had a traffic pin dropped in front of their site and another one on the other site out of state that they knew they were up against. And they looked at the employee trade area within a 35-minute drive. Now, what they were able to highlight was that they had almost twice as many people working in manufacturing compared to the other site out of state. And then following that too, with different subcategories in this data set, they were able to highlight really the affordability of their community. And they used all of that to help make that final pitch to Toyota. I'm going to remove the visitor trade area for a second. Let's just look at employees. Right now, how are you guys understanding? How do you guys know when you're talking about employee workforce and labor shed? Are you guys using drive times or ring radius? How are you understanding how far your employees are typically willing to travel?
Y'all can unmute and answer. Caitlin, I think everybody's so used to being on our webinar.
No, you're
They
good.
can't,
You've broken them, Liz.
they can't. I know.
It's okay. I'm used to chatting with people because otherwise I just talk to myself all day.
Yeah.
So the one thing we hear a lot is like, oh man, people are willing to drive like 25 or 30 minutes to work here, but the oh, we don't need a 200-minute. But what this true trade area function overlaid by like a drive time is really able to let you guys understand and visualize, well, outside of maybe that 20-minute drive or whatever you guys are assuming, um, what is that missing outside of that? So if you say, okay, yeah, people drive 20 minutes to work in North Hills. Well, at that point, you're excluding the people that work in Durham, Holly Springs, Willow Springs. It's showing you markets that you guys have to market to that maybe weren't on your radar before.
Caitlin, this is Jason Cannon. I'm actually from Wake Forest, which is just northeast of North Hills. We're sort of on the graph you had on there, the sort of periphery edge of the uh,
Yeah,
goldish
right.
brown color. And it's showing that part of Wake Forest is 20 minutes from North Hills. And I can tell you that, like, that is impossible, maybe in the middle of the night.
Yeah,
But like, unless we're going to sprout wings and fly, that's not going to happen.
fair.
So like, what is driving that data there? Because I'm very interested in this, if it could be a resource for us. But like, when I see that, I'm like, wait a minute, that's no way that's right.
Yeah, so this is the drive time is derived from STI pop stats. In regards to how they are deriving that, I don't necessarily know if they're using that from Red Zoom, Timothy Downs. I can't read and can't read and present at the same time. So I hope they're not using midnight when they're kind of making those projections in terms of drive time, because that is other feedback I've heard in regards to the PopStats data set too. So you're not the first person to say that about PopStats.
Sorry, Caitlin,
Okay.
I was just trying to point out that the tool that a lot of our communities, especially the rural ones, will use because of limited budgets is the Zoom Prospector tool that the state provides, and it's provided for a property database inventory purposes, but it has, as you might be aware, it has drive time capabilities within it.
Mm-hmm.
Very basic.
Yeah, not the drive time function, not always ideal.
Yeah.
Let's hop over to workplace. So under this STI workplace data set, you guys are able to highlight the total number of businesses and employees in any given trade area. Now, while we're doing this right now for a specific point of interest for that North Hills area, you also have the capability to do this in Placer's platform if you wanted to highlight your city or your county as well. What that would look like in our dashboard is, instead of looking at the employees of that area, you'd switch to the resident filter. Now, I know you might think, well, that's cool, but it's a lot of steps. We actually have a product release happening in like 3 weeks, and I kind of wish I would have waited to do this presentation with you guys. But what the product release is going to entail is more infographic style reporting that we put together for you for the employee trade areas, number of businesses, and salaries. So it's really just all of this data, but less manual clicks on your end. I might put a list together of the folks that are in this room today, and I can send that out to you guys when that gets released, because I think it's going to be very nice. So both of these trade areas, visitor and employee indexing, extremely low for any salaries under 10K up to really 35, 40K. I mean, this could tell you at this point is if a potential new business is talking with you guys about salary ranges, that these are not the salary ranges that people are driving into work for. If you guys wanted to get into the very nitty-gritty, these SOC codes are accessible for these different trade area functions as well.
Caitlin, on the salary ranges, how high did they go? I saw like greater than 100,000, but does it go in further detail beyond 100,000 or
Good
just
question.
greater than 100,000?
STI pop stats goes over 100,000. I think they do 250. Good question.
But in this particular area, it doesn't surprise me that there's a lot above 100,000. So
Yeah. So STI pop stats will go to 250, 255, and then greater than 5. One of the
okay.
really cool things about Placer, I mean, not only the fact that all of this data is really accessible and dynamic, but that we have dozens of different data sets in Placer's platform. So like while we were just looking at STI Workplace and you're like, this is showing me information I need, but it's like it's missing something. It's missing other subcategories. Oftentimes there's a different data set I can pull up that'll help answer the question that you're looking for. So for example, I mean, we all love and hate the census for many different reasons. But the census data does have different subcategories in it that PopStats doesn't have. So sometimes just that transport to work category, number of, what was it? There was I think it was a persons per household, family household. That wasn't it. There was a tribal nation I was working with out west that one of the issues they had on their reservation was overcrowding in their homes. And one of our data sets that we had in the platform was able to show that they were indexing about 1000% higher than the national average for people with 7+ person households. So kind of just showing that while that wasn't accessible in one data set, there was a different one that was able to highlight it for them. Okay, I'm going to show you guys a wild data set because it's probably going to be something you've never seen before. So hopefully you can take something unique away from this if you haven't already. So this data set called AGS Behaviors and Attitudes, this is sourced from something called the MRI-Simmons Behavior Tables. Beyond that, I'm not an expert in how they're getting their data, but I do want you guys to know that we have all of these data sets accessible in the methodologies under this marketplace tab. So if you were referencing this for an RFI or a grant application, you can get all of that right here. But this breaks down the preferences, beliefs, and habits of the visitors and employees of any space. So it's everything from pets to shopping. So for example, the Downtown Development Authority of Colorado Springs is a Placer customer, and they do a beer festival in their downtown every year, as you would expect. But what they noticed when they looked at the day of the event compared to visitation to their downtown district over the course of the year was that the day of the event was indexing particularly high for dog owners. So that prompted them to make the event dog friendly the next year, and they close to doubled the amount of people that showed up. There was a parks department I was working with in Massachusetts that was working on a grant application for some ADA accessible park equipment. And on the application, they were asked things like the number of type 1 and type 2 diabetics that were, I can't remember if it was visiting the park or within a walking distance. They had no idea how they were going to provide that. So they were really excited to see that that was a subcategory of this health and fitness section. All right, guys, how are we feeling about what we've gone through so far today? I have a couple other things I could show you, but want to see what has anything particularly piqued your interest? Are there things you could maybe see yourself using this for? It could prompt me to show you another couple things if any of this has been really hitting the mark. Do we have any universities or students on this call? I could also talk a little bit more about like university economic development.
Caitlin, this is Tom White from NC State University. I would love to hear you talk more about university talent.
Amazing. Okay. So a few different ways universities are using Placer's data. In terms of like workforce talent, I'm not sure if that's a way I've seen any universities use Placer's data yet, but that doesn't mean you can't be the first and that I'm not missing something. Just a few different ways that I am aware of universities using the data is the ability to filter for the employees and residents on campus, i.e. the students, to understand like where they're going, what their preferences are. We've also seen universities use Placer's data to look at their other competing universities and see where they're drawing their students from. To be able to use that to inform their marketing and enrollment campaigns. But I have NC State and North Carolina at Chapel Hill pulled up. And we're going to look at the a behavior and preference of the employees and the students on campus. So I want to show you guys a part of the platform I haven't gone through yet. This is our visitor journey section. So here we can show you where people like to go before and after any place, but also things like where else they like to go over the course of the year to help you understand, where leakage is happening. And if you guys are working on development or innovation districts in and around campus, what opportunities are existing. So let's switch this to, let's just switch this to dining for a second. So for example, out of all the employees and students at the North Carolina State campus, 68% of them have gone to the Atrium Food Court at some point over the course of the year. People are also going to the Cookout, Chipotle, 50% to the dining hall. And let's get rid of fast food. Insomnia Cookies makes every good college town list. I mean, a lot of these are really close to campus, which is great. I mean, I know that for you guys, seeing places about 2 miles away is a bit further, but all in all, what I'm seeing here is that people are staying close, and that's a good thing. We can also show you those things like where people go before and after any place too, which can be really helpful when looking at events. Are people staying in town after an event, or are they driving to hotels and restaurants outside of the city? And you guys do have the ability to look at this on a map function as well. So really only one of these is outside of the immediate campus area. was working with the university community in Virginia last week, and what they were interested in is bringing a Trader Joe's to town. So what they did was they put their university into the platform, and then they filtered for the students on campus. And then under this favorite chain section, they actually went and just filtered for grocery. And they noticed that Trader Joe's was in the top 3% or top 3 of the favorite grocery stores for their students, but the closest Trader Joe's was hundreds of miles away. So in doing that too, then they also were using Placer's platform to go look at other university towns that looked a lot like theirs, that had Trader Joe's, looked at their Trader Joe's, and were able to show how well with this rankings function that those Trader Joe's were performing, and using that to really start building their case. Because they thought it was going to help their tourism economy too, is a big part of their theory, especially with like rural Appalachia, where people are coming from, that they knew ultimately that would be a draw. Does that answer any of your questions or not at all?
No, this is great. It's a division of labor for our graduates being a source of talent for economic development access to mega sites. But this would be for our Centennial campus, where we have a 1,500 acre, 5 million square foot development, and with a lot of infill opportunities. So this is terrific.
Awesome. Who does that get managed through your department or who?
No, we're a big university. We've got 40,000 students, about 10,000 faculty and staff. So it's subdivided across a real estate, partnership office, economic development. So it would necessitate some collaboration internally, but also externally with our friends at Greater Raleigh Chamber of Commerce, Wake Economic Development, downtown, travel and tourism, all of the above.
Awesome. Great. Thanks for the question and engagement. Cool. Any other, got about 5 minutes left. Any other, interested in touching on the void analysis? Yeah, let's do it. Any other questions other than the void? Otherwise, we can use that and wrap up for today.
Yeah, guys, feel free to, if y'all have got any other questions, feel free to type them in as she's going through the question from Alyssa.
Cool. Let me share my screen. Awesome. We can finish with this today. So under this void analysis tool, what we are doing is we are examining thousands of different businesses and chains to tell you what would be the best fit for any site for development. Now, I know you guys, you're thinking exactly what I'm thinking. We are not putting a Buc-ee's in North Hill. There's a number of different filters you need to apply to make this feel relevant to you guys or to make this be relevant. So one of those things is purely the square footage size. You're not putting a 2 million square foot business into this North Hill space. So maybe it makes sense to filter this down to, let's just say, about 200,000 square feet. Still really big. Maybe you want to be specific about the number of locations that this business or other chain or restaurant, dental office has. Maybe it's a downtown area and you really want to stay boutique. You only want to look at those locations that have less than 10 locations across the state or the country. So you could add that filter. Maybe you are interested in those national retailers and you want to look at locations that have at least 10,000. All of those are accessible to you guys. Let's bump this up to at least 100 maybe. Get rid of some of the ones that maybe we're all less familiar with. Another filter that often makes sense to apply is those chains either already operating in the state or already operating nearby. Especially if you are talking about more of those regional locations, it doesn't make sense to be looking at locations that have 10 sites in Florida, for example. So let's bump this down to maybe just 200 miles. So what's going to load up then is showing you, well, out of all the people that are going to North Hills, how does that fit with some of these top performing chains across the entire country? And you can search for different locations and categories too. If you wanted to specifically look up Trader Joe's, you can do that. If you wanted to look at all grocery, all dental, gas stations, all of those are accessible. Let's take a look. Let's look at Steve Madden. So right now we're going to look at the demographics and trade area of the top 25% performing Steve Maddens in the entire country. And we're comparing it to the people already going to North Hills. Starting this, we're looking at a few different things that's going into these different scores. The first is a demographic fit score, and we'll break that down in just a second. 0% cannibalization rate. So is this worth your time and energy pursuing? Frequent co-tenants, these guys always like to follow each other around, especially when you're looking at these regional and national retailers. Nearest location is 120 miles away, and there's 2 locations already in the state. Now, if you're looking at those top performing locations compared to North Hills, the trade area size in square miles for North Hills is larger, geographically larger than most Steve Madden locations. The trade area population is right on par with their top performing locations. And population density for North Hills is a bit lower, but you're pulling from a larger trade area. The household income score is right on point with their top performing locations. Education, this North Hills area is leaning higher for people with an advanced and bachelor's degree. And then the age is right on point as well. There are different subcategories too that you can have built into these scores. Right now, these are excluded, but still great scores. It's like Charlotte is your next closest Steve Madden location. And then here's your list of other frequent co-tenants. Placer does have a contacts app too for different franchises and headquarters. We're working with Fran Data. And then there's 2 other contact providers that we partner with too. So if that's something that's of interest to you guys, we can work with you on that. Oh, Retail Lease Track is the other one. We also have different like site selection tools too, that if any of you guys were interested in going through this in further detail on your community or specific location, there's a lot more retail tools you could find really powerful. But I know we are at the top of the hour. Timothy, did I leave anything hanging? You're muted. Do you recall the Virginia University that sought Trader Joe's?
Hopefully everyone found this to be interesting and maybe wet your whistle a little bit for further conversation with Caitlin and Placer. We appreciate you all being with us today. I'm sure Caitlin would be happy to field questions later on through just individual contact if you have additional questions. So Liz, I think we can probably share her contact information when we get there. So Caitlin, thanks again. We appreciate you sharing your experience and Placer with us. I know I've seen Placer several times before and have always thought it to be a very interesting and powerful tool. Never had the opportunity to become a subscriber, but nevertheless. Well, before we go today, everyone, I'd like to remind you of some upcoming events, NCEDA events. We've got our legislative breakfast coming March 26th, our Emerging Executives Forum on April 9 and 10, and it'll be here in Durham. Eastern North Carolina Networking Luncheon will be on April 17 in Greenville. So registration is open for all these events. You can check out the website or look at your bi-weekly newsletter for more information there. Also want to draw your attention to save the date for some more events. 2 more regional networking luncheons this spring. Western NC will be on May 9 in Asheville, and the Triad Networking Luncheon will be on May 20 in High Point. And of course, our annual conference coming up this June will be June 11 through 13 in Wilmington, and registration will open up soon. So thanks again to Caitlin. Thanks again to all of you for joining us, and we hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you.